There is a small silver airplane sitting in hangars across America right now that most pilots will not touch. Not because it is old, not because it is broken, but because for decades this airplane had a reputation that followed it like a shadow. Insurance companies refused to cover it, flight schools banned it, and pilots whispered its name the way sailors used to whisper about ships that never came home. They called it a widowmaker. This is the story of the Mitsubishi MU-2, a plane so fast, so efficient, and so unforgiving that it forced an entire industry to change the way it trains pilots. By the end of this video, you will understand why this airplane still divides the aviation world into two camps: those who call it a killer and those who call it the most misunderstood aircraft ever built. If you love stories where machines and human error collide, hit subscribe because this channel is where those stories live. In the early 1960s, Mitsubishi was known for cars, not planes. But the company had a history in aviation that went back to World War II, when its engineers built one of the most feared fighters in the Pacific, the Zero. 2 decades later, Mitsubishi's engineers were not building fighters anymore. They were chasing a different kind of dream. They wanted to build a business airplane that could do something nobody else could do: take off from a short strip of gravel in the mountains, climb like a rocket, and then cruise faster than almost anything else in its class. It sounds impossible. A short-field airplane and a speed demon are usually opposites. Short takeoff means big wings for lift. Speed means small wings for less drag. You cannot have both. Mitsubishi's engineers decided they would have both anyway. The MU-2 was given a small, stubby wing, barely bigger than what you would expect on a plane half its size. On paper, that wing should not have been able to lift the aircraft off a short runway. So the engineers cheated physics. They covered nearly the entire trailing edge of the wing with massive Fowler flaps, and instead of traditional ailerons for rolling the aircraft left and right, they used spoilers, small panels that pop up on top of the wing to kill lift on one side and bank the plane. The result was strange to look at and even stranger to fly: a tiny wing, giant flaps, and no ailerons at all. But it worked. The MU-2 could scream in at over 200 knots, then use those flaps to bleed off speed and drop onto a short strip like a much smaller aircraft. Once it was in the air, it could outrun almost every other turboprop in the sky. For a business traveler in the 1960s, this was revolutionary. You could fly into a tiny regional airstrip near your factory or your ranch and still get there faster than a commercial airliner flying between major hubs. Mitsubishi partnered with Mooney to sell and support the aircraft in the United States, and later built an assembly and support operation in San Angelo, Texas. American business owners, ranchers, and charter operators fell for the MU-2 immediately. It was fast, it was efficient, it could land almost anywhere. By the time production ended in the mid-1980s, Mitsubishi had built roughly 700 of these aircraft, and hundreds were flying across the United States, more than in any other country in the world. For a decade, the MU-2 was one of the most successful business turboprops on the market. But somewhere underneath the sales numbers, a darker pattern was forming.
Accident reports started piling up. Not all at once, not in a dramatic single crash that made headlines everywhere, but slowly, one small news story at a time, across different states, different pilots, different weather conditions. A plane spins in during an instrument approach in icing conditions. A pilot loses control after an engine failure, and the aircraft rolls before he can react. Another crash, then another. By the 1990s, insurance underwriters had noticed something that regulators were still arguing about. The MU-2's accident rate, especially its fatal accident rate, was significantly higher than comparable turboprops of its era. Word spread through pilot circles. Some insurance companies would not write a policy on the aircraft at all. Others demanded specialized training that cost more than some pilots had ever spent on flight instruction in their lives. The airplane earned a nickname that stuck to it for the rest of its life: the Widowmaker. Here is where the story gets complicated, and where it stops being simple. The MU-2 was not a forgiving airplane. It had no ailerons. Remember, it used spoilers instead, which meant it handled differently from almost anything else pilots had trained on. Its stall characteristics were unusual. Its systems, especially the pressurization and hydraulics, were more complex than many pilots stepping up from smaller aircraft had ever managed. And that was the real problem. Many of the pilots flying the MU-2 were not airline captains with thousands of hours in high-performance aircraft. They were often single pilots, business owners, doctors, entrepreneurs, who bought a fast, capable airplane and moved into it without ever fully grasping how different it was from anything they had flown before. The airplane was not being flown wrong on purpose. It was being flown by pilots who did not fully understand what they were sitting in. And in aviation, that gap between an aircraft's true demands and a pilot's real preparation is where accidents are born.
By the early 2000s, the accident numbers had become impossible to ignore. In 2005, the Federal Aviation Administration did something it had done for very few civilian aircraft in history. It issued a special federal aviation regulation, specifically targeting the MU-2. The regulation required every pilot flying the aircraft to complete standardized aircraft-specific training and recurrent checks, training that went far beyond what was normally required for an aircraft of its size and weight. For the first time, there was a mandatory, structured path to actually understand this airplane before being allowed to fly it alone. And then something remarkable happened. The accident rate dropped dramatically. It turned out the Widowmaker was never a mechanical monster hunting down its pilots. It was a demanding, high-performance machine that had simply never been given the respect its complexity required, until federal regulation finally forced that respect onto the pilots flying it. Today, the Mitsubishi MU-2 still flies. Hundreds of them remain active in the United States, prized by pilots who understand exactly what they are getting into, a fast, efficient, short-field turboprop that rewards precision and punishes carelessness in equal measure. Among trained, current MU-2 pilots, it is no longer treated as a killer. It is treated as one of the most capable turboprops ever built, an airplane that can climb faster, cruise faster, and land shorter than nearly anything else in its class. Pilots who fly it correctly speak about it the way sailors speak about a difficult but beautiful ship, with respect, not fear. The Mitsubishi MU-2's story is not really about a bad airplane. It is about what happens when human ambition builds a machine smarter and more demanding than the training system around it, and what it costs in lives before that gap finally gets closed.
The MU-2 never stopped being fast. It never stopped being capable. What changed was how seriously pilots were forced to take it. And that is often the real story behind the planes we call cursed. Not a flaw in the metal, but a flaw in how well we prepared the humans flying it. If this story pulled you in, subscribe for more deep dives into the aircraft that tested the limits of both machines and the people who flew them. And let me know in the comments, do you think the MU-2 deserved its reputation, or was it always misunderstood?